The boardroom was silent except for the sound of papers shuffling. 20 executives sat around the mahogany table, watching as the CEO, my boss, my mentor, the man I'd trusted for 8 years, prepared to announce my termination. It is with great regret, Richard Holloway began, his voice dripping with false sincerity, that we must address the situation with our former Vice President of Operations, Jennifer Cole. Former. He'd already decided. This wasn't a discussion. It was an execution. Jennifer's performance issues have been well documented, Richard continued. The unauthorized expenses, the failed projects, the inappropriate relationships with vendors. We simply cannot overlook these violations of company policy. I sat at the far end of the table, my hands folded in my lap, my face a mask of calm. I'd known this was coming. I'd planned for it. But hearing the lies spoken so confidently, so publicly, still made my blood boil. Therefore, Richard said, the board has voted to terminate Jennifer's employment effective immediately with cause. She will receive no severance, no benefits continuation, and we will be pursuing legal action to recover the funds she misappropriated. He looked at me with triumph in his eyes. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd destroyed me. He was wrong. I stood up slowly, straightening my jacket, meeting the eyes of every board member in turn. Richard, I said, my voice steady and clear. Before we proceed, I think the board should see something. I opened my briefcase and removed a folder. I walked to the head of the table and placed it in front of Richard. What is this? He asked, his confidence faltering. Evidence, I said. Of your embezzlement. Your fraud. Your conspiracy to frame me for crimes you committed. I turned to address the board. For the past 18 months, Richard Holloway has stolen approximately $4 million from this company. He created fake vendors and approved payments to shell companies he controls. He forged my signature on purchase orders. And he systematically destroyed my reputation to cover his tracks. Richard laughed, a nervous, desperate sound. This is absurd. Jennifer is clearly unhinged. These accusations are documented. I interrupted. Every transaction. Every shell company. Every lie. I have bank records, email chains, and, I paused for effect, video of Richard accessing the accounting system using my credentials after hours. The room was frozen. The board members were staring at Richard with dawning horror. But that's not all. I continued. I also have proof that Richard has been sharing confidential company information with our competitor, Apex Solutions. Information that cost us the Henderson contract and the Meridian deal. Richard's face had gone gray. He was clutching the folder, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold it. You're bluffing, he whispered. You don't have. I have everything, Richard. I leaned down, close enough to smell the sweat breaking out on his forehead. You taught me to be thorough. To document everything. To always have a backup plan. You just never thought I'd use those lessons against you. I turned back to the board. I propose we table the discussion of my termination. Instead, I suggest we discuss Richard's immediate resignation and the criminal charges I intend to file. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. 20. Then the chairman spoke. Richard, he said quietly, I think you should call your lawyer. Richard Holloway collapsed into his chair, the folder of evidence slipping from his fingers, and I knew. I had won. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I started at Meridian Industries 8 years ago as an administrative assistant. I was 24, fresh out of college with a business degree and no connections. My starting salary was $32,000 a year, and my office was a cubicle next to the copy machine. Richard Holloway was the VP of sales then, a rising star in the company. He was 35, handsome, charismatic, the kind of man who commanded attention when he walked into a room. He noticed me on my third day. You're the new assistant, right? Jennifer? He leaned against my cubicle wall, smiling down at me. I need someone to help me organize the quarterly reports. You think you can handle that? Yes, sir. Absolutely. Sir. He laughed. Call me Richard. We're going to be working together a lot, Jennifer. I can tell you're going places. He was right. We did work together a lot. Richard took me under his wing. He taught me about sales, about negotiation, about corporate strategy. He gave me opportunities to prove myself, projects that were way above my pay grade, challenges that forced me to grow. Within 2 years, I was a junior account manager. Within 4, I was director of operations. Within 6, I was vice president, the youngest in company history. And through it all, Richard was my champion, my mentor, my friend. Or so I thought. The first red flag should have been Richard's wife, Cynthia. She was a fixture at company events, beautiful, polished, always smiling. But there was something cold about her. Something calculating. "Richard speaks so highly of you," she said to me at the holiday party my second year. "He says you're his secret weapon. His little prodigy." "Richard has been very supportive of my career," I said carefully. "Has he?" Cynthia's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Just be careful, Jennifer. Richard's very good at making people feel special. But he always has an agenda. Always." I dismissed her warning as jealousy. Cynthia was insecure, I told myself. She didn't like how much time Richard spent with me, even though it was purely professional. I was naive. The second red flag was Derek, our CFO. Derek had been with the company for 20 years. He was quiet, methodical, the kind of man who triple-checked every number. He and Richard had never gotten along. "Be careful of Richard," Derek told me one day, catching me in the elevator. "He's not what he seems." "What do you mean?" Derek hesitated, then shook his head. "Just watch your back, Jennifer. And don't sign anything without reading it very, very carefully." I should have listened. I should have asked more questions. But Richard had already convinced me that Derek was a dinosaur, out of touch with modern business practices, jealous of Richard's success. So I ignored the warning. And I paid the price. It started with small things. Richard asked me to approve some expenses. Just routine stuff, Jennifer, nothing to worry about. Vendors I'd never heard of. Services I didn't understand. Amounts that seemed high but not outrageous. I trusted him. I signed. Then came the Henderson project, a massive contract that would have been the biggest in company history. Richard put me in charge, told me I was ready, promised me a promotion if we landed it. I worked 80-hour weeks for 3 months. I built relationships with the Henderson team. I crafted a proposal that was perfect, innovative, cost-effective, exactly what they needed. We lost the contract to Apex Solutions, our biggest competitor. "It's not your fault," Richard told me, his face full of sympathy. "These things happen. You'll get the next one." But I kept thinking about the meeting. About how Apex seemed to know our strategy before we presented it. About how their proposal was suspiciously similar to ours, just slightly better. I started investigating. And what I found made me sick. Richard had been sharing our confidential information with Apex. For years. He had a contact there, a woman named Victoria who he'd been feeding intel to in exchange for kickbacks. The Henderson contract was just the latest in a long line of betrayals. And the fake vendors? The inflated expenses? Richard was embezzling, creating shell companies, approving payments to himself, using my signature to cover his tracks. I had proof, emails, bank records, a paper trail that led directly to Richard's door. I went to him first. I told myself I was giving him a chance to explain, to make things right, to turn himself in. "Jennifer," he said, his voice soft and dangerous, "you don't understand what you're looking at." "I understand perfectly, Richard. You've been stealing from the company. You've been sabotaging our deals. You've been using me to cover your crimes. And what are you going to do about it?" He leaned back in his chair, completely at ease. "Go to the board? They love me, Jennifer. I'm the golden boy. You're just you. A VP who got lucky. I have evidence." "Do you?" He smiled. "Or do you have documents that look like evidence? Documents that could just as easily be interpreted as proof of your incompetence? Your negligence? Your criminal conspiracy with Apex?" I stared at him. "What? I've been preparing for this moment for years, Jennifer. If you go to the board, I'll tell them you were my accomplice. That you helped me steal the money. That you shared the confidential information with Apex. I have emails, fake ones of course but very convincing, that show you coordinating with Victoria. No one will believe that. Won't they? Richard opened a drawer and removed a folder. You've been having financial problems, haven't you? Your mother's medical bills. Your brother's drug addiction. I know all about it, Jennifer. And I know that a woman in your position might be desperate enough to do anything for money. He slid the folder across the desk. Inside were documents, fake documents showing payments to my personal accounts. Emails I never wrote. Contracts I never signed. I've built a case against you, Jennifer. A very convincing one. If you go to the board, I'll destroy you. You'll be fired, blacklisted, possibly arrested, and I'll walk away clean. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The man I'd trusted, the mentor I'd admired, had spent years setting me up to be his fall guy. Why? I whispered. Why would you do this to me? Richard's expression softened, just for a moment, and I saw something almost like regret. Because you were perfect, Jennifer. Smart, loyal, hardworking. The perfect patsy. And because. He paused. Because I could. I walked out of Richard's office that day with a choice to make. I could fight him. Go to the board, present my evidence, hope that someone would believe me over the company's golden boy. Or I could run. Quit, find another job, try to rebuild my career somewhere else. Or I could do something else entirely. I could play his game. I could let him think he'd won. And I could use that time to build a trap so perfect, so inescapable, that when it snapped shut, Richard Holloway would never recover. It took me 18 months. 18 months of pretending to be the loyal protege. 18 months of approving expenses I knew were fraudulent. Signing documents I knew were traps, playing the part of the naive, trusting subordinate. 18 months of gathering evidence. I documented everything. Every transaction. Every email. Every lie. I built a case so airtight that no lawyer in the world could poke holes in it. But I didn't stop there. I also built my own network. I reached out to Derek, the CFO who'd warned me, and told him everything. He became my ally, my eyes and ears in the finance department. I cultivated relationships with board members, quietly, carefully, making sure they knew me as competent, trustworthy, someone who had the company's best interests at heart. And I set my trap. Richard thought he was winning. He thought he'd broken me, turned me into his obedient puppet. He started giving me bigger projects, more responsibility, more access to sensitive information. He was setting me up for something. I could feel it. A major theft. A massive fraud. Something that would destroy me when it came to light. I let him. I played along. I acted grateful for his trust, eager to prove myself, desperate for his approval. You're doing great, Jennifer, he told me one day, patting my shoulder. I'm proud of you. Thank you, Richard. I couldn't have done it without you. He smiled, that charming, predatory smile. I know. What Richard didn't know was that every document he had me sign, every transaction he had me approve, every project he put me on, I was documenting it all, creating a paper trail that showed his manipulation, his coercion, his criminal conspiracy. I was also building evidence of my own innocence. Time-stamped emails showing I was following orders. Witness statements from colleagues who saw Richard directing my work. Financial records proving I never received a penny of the stolen money. And I was getting close to the big fish. Richard was planning something massive. A merger with Apex Solutions. A merger that would make him CEO of the combined company and leave Meridian Industries a hollow shell. He'd been negotiating in secret, using confidential information to structure a deal that would enrich him by tens of millions. He was going to destroy the company I'd helped build. And he was going to use me to do it. I couldn't let that happen. The board meeting was scheduled for a Thursday. Richard had called it himself, a special session to discuss personnel matters. I knew what that meant. He was ready to spring his trap. He was going to accuse me of embezzlement, incompetence, conspiracy. He was going to destroy my career and my reputation in one fell swoop. He thought I didn't see it coming. I arrived at the boardroom early. I set up my presentation, slides, documents, video evidence. I made sure the board members saw me, calm and professional, preparing for the meeting. Richard arrived 10 minutes late, striding in like he owned the place. Which in a way he did. "Jennifer," he said, his voice full of false warmth. "I'm glad you're here. I think it's important that we address these issues, together." "I agree, Richard. Very important." The meeting began. Richard made his presentation, smooth, confident, devastating. He laid out his case against me with surgical precision. The unauthorized expenses, the failed projects, the inappropriate relationships with vendors. The board members were nodding, frowning, looking at me with suspicion and disappointment. And then Richard dropped the bomb. "Therefore," he said, "I propose we terminate Jennifer's employment immediately, with cause, and pursue legal action to recover the approximately $500,000 she has misappropriated." $500,000. He'd been busy. The chairman turned to me. "Jennifer, do you have anything to say?" I stood up. I walked to the front of the room, and I began my own presentation. "Gentlemen," I said, "what you're about to see is going to be difficult to believe, but I ask you to keep an open mind, and to remember that I have documentation for every claim I'm about to make." I clicked the remote. The first slide appeared. A flowchart showing the flow of money from Meridian Industries to Richard's shell companies. 18 months ago, I discovered that Richard Holloway was embezzling from this company. Over the past 3 years, he has stolen approximately $4 million. Here's how he did it. For the next 45 minutes, I laid out my case. The fake vendors, the forged signatures, the kickbacks from Apex Solutions, the conspiracy to merge our company into a shell of its former self. I showed them emails, real emails, not the fake ones Richard had created. I showed them bank records. I showed them video of Richard accessing my computer after hours, using my credentials to approve transactions. And I showed them the merger agreement. The one Richard had negotiated in secret. The one that would have made him rich while destroying everything we'd built. The boardroom was silent when I finished. Richard was pale, shaking, his confident facade completely shattered. This is insane," he stammered. "She's lying. She's trying to frame me. Richard," the chairman interrupted, his voice cold. "I suggest you stop talking." He turned to me. "Jennifer, this is extraordinary. Do you have all this documentation?" "Yes, sir. Originals and copies. Stored in multiple secure locations. And I have witnesses. Derek, our CFO, can confirm the financial irregularities. And Victoria from Apex Solutions has agreed to testify about Richard's kickbacks in exchange for immunity." Richard's head snapped up. "Victoria? She would never." "She already has," I said quietly. "She recorded your last meeting, Richard. The one where you discussed the merger and your retirement package. She's been working with the FBI for 6 months." The lie was small, but it was enough. Richard's face went from pale to gray. He knew he was finished. I need to call my lawyer," he whispered. "Yes," the chairman agreed. "I think you do." Richard Holloway was arrested 3 days later. The charges were extensive: embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy, insider trading. He faced 20 years in prison. His wife, Cynthia, filed for divorce the same day. Turns out she'd known about some of his activities. She'd been spending the embezzled money for years. But she turned state's evidence to save herself, providing even more documentation of Richard's crimes. The merger with Apex Solutions was canceled. The company was saved. And I was promoted to Chief Operating Officer. The first woman to hold that position in Meridian's history. But the best part? The absolute best part? Richard's face when he realized I'd won. I visited him once, in the holding cell where he was waiting for trial. He looked terrible, thin, pale, the charm completely gone. "Why?" he asked, his voice hollow. "Why did you do this to me?" "I didn't do anything to you, Richard. You did it to yourself. I just stopped letting you get away with it." "I made you," he said, his voice rising. "I built your career. Without me, you'd still be an assistant." "You're right," I agreed. "You did help me. You taught me how to play the game, how to plan ahead, how to document everything." I leaned close to the bars. You just never thought I'd use those lessons against you. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he looked away. Get out, he whispered. I left. I didn't look back. It's been 2 years since that board meeting. Meridian Industries is thriving. We've expanded into new markets, launched innovative products, and become an industry leader. The board offered me the CEO position last year. I turned it down. I prefer operations. I like building things. Derek retired, but we still have lunch every month. He tells me he's proud of me. That I did what he never could. He knew Richard was corrupt for years, but he was too afraid to act. I'm not afraid anymore. Richard is serving 15 years in federal prison. His appeals have all been denied. Cynthia got a lighter sentence in exchange for her testimony. She's out now, living somewhere in Florida, working as a real estate agent. I don't think about them much. I have better things to do. I have a company to run, a team to lead, a career to build. And I have a lesson that I'll never forget. Trust is precious, but verification is essential. Loyalty is admirable, but not when it's blind. Richard Holloway taught me that. In the end, he was the best teacher I ever had. You got exactly what you asked for, Richard. And so did I. If you enjoyed this story, kindly comment, like and hit the subscribe button.